The day my signature suddenly became dangerous. The first time my daughter called me confused was inside a bank. Not at home, not during some quiet family dinner. In front of three strangers and a young man in a gray suit who kept adjusting his glasses, as if he'd accidentally wandered into the wrong conversation. It was March 14th, 2023, 10:40 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was looking at the digital clock on the wall when Laura gently pushed a stack of documents toward me and said the words that changed everything. "Dad, just sign here. It's routine." Routine. That's a word people use when they hope you won't ask questions. I'm 74 years old, not dead. For 42 years, I ran a small construction company in Cedar Falls, Iowa. We built things that still stand today: schools, 2 medical clinics, and a church with a brick tower that can be seen from 3 miles away on a clear morning. My hands still remember the weight of wet concrete. My back remembers every winter. But apparently, according to my daughter, my mind had begun to disappear. At least, that's what she'd been telling people. I only learned that later. The bank smelled like floor polish and cheap coffee. Laura sat beside me, tapping her manicured fingernails on the desk. The banker, his name was Ethan, according to the little metal badge, kept flipping through a folder labeled Account Authorization. Cunningham Family Trust. I frowned at the title. Trust. I asked. Laura smiled in that tight, patient way people use with children and the elderly. "It's just paperwork, Dad." She turned the pages toward me. 3 signature lines. My name typed neatly beneath them. Robert Cunningham. The amount listed on the first page made me pause. $682,450.17. That was the total balance of my retirement accounts and savings. The money my wife Margaret and I had built over 4 decades of work. Margaret used to call it our quiet safety net. She died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to the funeral. The house felt empty after that, like someone had removed the center beam and the structure was waiting to collapse. That's when Laura began visiting more often, helping with bills, offering to organize things. At first it felt comforting. Family stepping in, family caring. "Dad." Laura's voice snapped me back to the bank office. She slid a pen toward me. "Sign right here." I picked it up, but something in the document bothered me. Maybe it was the wording. Maybe it was the way Ethan, the banker, kept glancing at Laura instead of me. "What exactly does this do?" I asked. Laura sighed. The sound was small but sharp. "It just lets me help manage your accounts." I already manage them. Her smile tightened. "Dad, remember the electric bill last month?" "Yes." "You forgot to pay it." "I paid it 2 days later." Ethan cleared his throat softly. Laura leaned closer to him and said something that made my stomach tighten. "He's been getting a little confused lately." The word hung in the air. Confused. I looked at her slowly. "I'm sitting right here," I said. "Oh, I know, Dad." Her voice turned sweet again. "We're just trying to make things easier for you." Easier. I had heard that word before too. Usually right before something expensive happened. I turned another page. Legal language. Power of attorney. Full financial authority. My signature would give Laura control over everything. The accounts, the investments, even the house. Estimated property value. $540,000. The total assets listed at the bottom made my throat tighten. $1,222,000. Margaret and I had spent 45 years building that number, and now it was sitting on a bank desk like a piece of paper waiting to be claimed. "Dad," Laura said softly, "please don't make this complicated." I looked up. When did I become complicated? She exchanged a glance with Ethan, the kind people share when they think someone else can't see it. "He forgets things," she told the banker quietly. I set the pen down. "I forget where I left my glasses," I said. "I don't forget how to read." Silence settled across the office. Ethan shifted in his chair. Laura's smile disappeared. "Dad," she said, her voice suddenly colder. "Dr. Benson already said your memory is declining." That caught my attention. "I saw Dr. Benson once," I said. "Yes, for a blood pressure check." "Well," she shrugged, "he mentioned cognitive changes." I stared at her. "Did he say that to me?" "No." "Did he test me?" "No." But she said it with such confidence that for a brief moment, even I wondered if maybe I'd missed something. That's how these things begin. Not with handcuffs, with doubt. I pushed the papers back, across the desk. I'm not signing anything today. Laura froze. Dad. No. The word surprised even me. Ethan exhaled quietly. Laura stood up, so abruptly her chair scraped the floor. He doesn't understand what he's doing, she told the banker. And then she said the sentence that would later echo in a courtroom. My father is confused. She was wrong. I wasn't confused. Not yet. But as I walked out of that bank, watching my own daughter, whispering to the banker behind my back, a strange thought crept into my mind. If she needed my signature so badly, what exactly had she already done without it? If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. When someone wants to prove you're losing your mind, they rarely start with doctors. They start with small stories, little ones, harmless ones, stories that travel faster than the truth. 3 days after the incident at the bank, my neighbor Harold stopped me while I was checking the mailbox. Harold is 71, retired from the post office, and wears the same faded Iowa Hawkeyes jacket every morning when he walks his dog. Morning, Bob, he said cautiously. Morning. He hesitated. That alone was strange. Harold normally talks about weather, lawn fertilizer, or college football with the enthusiasm of a sports radio host. But that morning he shifted from one foot to the other like a man about to deliver bad news. How you holding up, he asked. Fine. Another pause. Laura said you've been having some memory issues. There it was, delivered gently, wrapped in concern. But the damage had already been done. I stared at him for a moment. Did she now? Harold nodded. She mentioned it after the bank thing. Said you got confused about some paperwork. Confused. The word again. It was spreading. That afternoon, I made coffee in Margaret's old percolator. The thing is older than my youngest grandchild and makes a sound like a small steam engine when it brews. Margaret refused to replace it because she insisted the coffee tasted better. She was right. I sat at the kitchen table looking through my checkbook. Numbers don't lie. At least, not the way people do. My monthly expenses were simple. Utilities, $380. Groceries, roughly $450. Property tax escrow, $620. Insurance, $140. My pension from the company's sale in 2012 still brought in $4,900 a month. Social Security added another $2,100. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, comfortably stable. Margaret and I had planned it that way. And yet, when I opened the latest account statement, something strange caught my eye. 3 transfers, all from February. $25,000, $35,000, $40,000, total, $100,000, transferred to an account ending in 7841. I didn't recognize the number, but I did recognize the name printed beside it. L. Cunningham. Laura. For a long time I just sat there. The coffee cooled beside me. The kitchen clock ticked. Margaret's old ceramic fruit bowl sat untouched in the middle of the table. I tried to remember authorizing those transfers. Nothing. No memory of a conversation. No paperwork. Just one vague recollection. 3 weeks ago, Laura had stopped by with her laptop. Dad, I need you to log into your bank for a second, she'd said. Something about updating contact information. I typed the password. She'd taken the keyboard. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now the numbers on the page looked different. They looked like fingerprints. I called her that evening. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hi, Dad. Her voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. I'm looking at my bank statement, I said. Silence. A thin, careful silence. What about it? There are 3 transfers here. Oh, she said quickly. That, Dad, we talked about it. No, I said calmly. We didn't. Another pause. Then the explanation arrived fast and practiced. That was for the house repairs. What house repairs? The roof. My roof is fine. Well, preventative work. I rubbed my forehead. Laura, you took $100,000 from my account. I didn't take it, she snapped suddenly. I moved it to your account. It's temporary. For what? For managing things. The words are coming out sharper now, more defensive. I could almost picture her pacing across her kitchen floor. You're getting older, Dad. Things are complicated. Someone has to keep track of everything. I've been keeping track of everything since 1978. That's exactly the problem, she said. What problem? You don't realize when you're making mistakes. I leaned back in the chair. Name one. Silence again. Longer this time. Then she changed tactics. Dr. Benson thinks you need support. Dr. Benson hasn't spoken to me in 6 months. Well, he spoke to me. That was the moment something cold settled in my chest. Not anger. Something heavier. Realization. Laura, I said quietly. Yes. Are you telling people I'm mentally declining? Her answer came without hesitation. We're concerned about you. That wasn't what I asked. I'm asking a very simple question. Another pause. Then she said it. Yes. After the call ended, I sat alone in the quiet house. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed slowly outside. Margaret's photo sat on the counter beside the sink. Taken 20 years ago at a lake in Minnesota. She was wearing that ridiculous straw had she insisted made her look adventurous. I stared at the picture for a long time. Did we raise her wrong? I asked the empty kitchen. The photograph didn't answer. But something else did. The memory. Suddenly, I remembered the banker's face in that office. The way Ethan had looked uncomfortable. The way he kept glancing at Laura. Like he suspected something. 2 days later the phone rang at 9:15 in the morning. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Mr. Cunningham? Yes. This is Ethan Parker from Cedar Falls Community Bank. My grip tightened on the phone. Yes, Ethan. His voice lowered slightly. I probably shouldn't be calling, but something about that meeting last week didn't sit right with me. My pulse slowed. What exactly didn't sit right? There was a small pause. Then he said the sentence that made everything suddenly much clearer. Your daughter came back yesterday. I felt my stomach tighten. And she brought legal documents. What kind of documents? Another pause. The kind people make when they know they're stepping into dangerous territory. Then he said quietly, she's trying to file for financial guardianship over you. And just like that, my daughter wasn't just calling me confused anymore. She was trying to make it official. The paper that turned my daughter into my opponent. When a stranger tells you your own child is trying to take control of your life, your first instinct is denial. Your second instinct is anger. Mine was neither. Mine was arithmetic. I hung up with Ethan Parker and sat quietly at the kitchen table for several minutes. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled slowly down Maple Street. I watched it through the window like a man observing ordinary life from the wrong side of the glass. Financial guardianship. The words sounded clinical. Harmless even. But I had run a company long enough to understand what legal language really meant. Control. Total control. If the court approved it, Laura would gain authority over everything in my name. My bank accounts. $682,450. The house. Estimated $540,000. My investment fund. About $110,000. Over $1.3 million in assets. Margaret and I had spent 45 years building that number. Laura was trying to collect it like an insurance payout. And the clever part? If the court believed I was mentally declining, I would lose the right to object. At 11:20 that morning, I drove downtown. Not to the bank. To a place I hadn't visited in almost 10 years. Henderson and Pike Accounting. The building still smelled faintly of printer toner and old carpet. The receptionist looked new, but the framed certificates on the wall were exactly where I remember them. Can I help you? She asked. I'm looking for David Pike. She checked the computer. He's semi-retired now. Only comes in Tuesdays. I smiled slightly. Good. Today's Tuesday. David Pike had been my accountant for 28 years. A thin man with careful gray hair and the habit of tapping a pencil against his teeth when he thought. When he stepped out of his office and saw me sitting in the waiting area, his eyebrows rose. Bob Cunningham? The one and only. He laughed and shook my hand. I thought you moved to Florida or something. Tempting, I said, but I stayed. We went into his office, and within 10 minutes, I had laid everything on the desk. The bank statement, the transfers, the guardianship attempt. David didn't interrupt. He just read, slowly. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled through his nose. Well, he said, that bad? He tapped the pencil against his teeth 3 times. Worse than bad. Your daughter, he said carefully, is following a very common legal playbook. That sentence alone made my stomach tighten. How common. Common enough that I've seen it 6 times in the last 15 years. He slid the bank statement toward me. Step 1, establish a narrative. What narrative? That you're declining mentally. I thought about Harold at the mailbox, neighbors, doctors, the banker. She's already doing that, I said. David nodded. Step 2, move money slowly so it looks like assistance, not theft. He tapped the 3 transfers. 25,000, 35,000, 40,000. Why those numbers? Because anything under 50 often avoids automatic internal reviews. Clever, cold, professional. And step 3? I asked. David didn't smile. Step 3 is guardianship. I felt my jaw tighten. So, if the court approves it, she controls every dollar you own. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then David asked a question that surprised me. Do you have any medical diagnosis for cognitive decline? No. Any neurological evaluations? No. Any formal complaints from banks or financial institutions? No. He nodded slowly. Good. That sounds promising. It is. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. Because, right now, the only evidence of confusion is coming from her. I sat there, absorbing that. Outside the office window, a delivery truck backed up with a loud beeping sound. David folded his hands. But Bob, you need to move fast. How fast? Guardianship hearings can happen in 30 to 45 days. Jesus. And if the court appoints a temporary guardian before that, I lose access to my own money. Yes. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. When he returned, he placed a business card on the desk. Rebecca Alvarez, attorney at law, Elder Financial Protection, best lawyer in the county for cases like this. He said, cases like this? Children trying to legally take over their parents' assets. I stared at the card. Is it really that common? David gave a tired smile. You'd be amazed what money does to people. I slipped the card into my pocket. David, yes. If Laura wins this, he didn't let me finish. You'll lose control of everything. The bluntness was almost refreshing. And if she loses? He paused. Then he said quietly, if she's already moved money without legal authority, she could be in serious trouble. When I walked out of Henderson and Pike 20 minutes later, the afternoon sun felt unusually bright. For 74 years, Laura had been my daughter, my child, the little girl who once cried because a stray kitten followed her home. But now the situation had changed. Now there were bank transfers, legal filings, and a court date somewhere in the near future. For the first time in my life, I understood something with perfect clarity. I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with strategy. And if my daughter thought I was too confused to fight it, she was about to learn something my construction crews knew very well. Old men who built things for 40 years don't collapse easily. I called Rebecca Alvarez the same afternoon. Not the next day. Not after thinking it over. Immediately. When a man discovers someone is trying to legally take control of his life, hesitation becomes expensive. Her office answered on the second ring. Alvarez Legal Group. My name is Robert Cunningham, I said. David Pike suggested I speak with Rebecca. There was a short pause. Oh, yes, Mr. Cunningham. He called ahead. That caught my attention. Did he? Yes. He said your situation might be time-sensitive. Rebecca Alvarez turned out to be younger than I expected. Mid-40s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes, and a desk so organized it looked like the papers had signed a peace treaty with gravity. When I finished explaining everything, bank transfers, the bank meeting, the guardianship attempt, she didn't react with shock. She reacted with recognition. That explains the timing, she said. Timing. She opened a folder on her laptop. Your daughter filed preliminary guardianship paperwork yesterday morning. Yesterday? Yes. Before I even spoke to you. Rebecca nodded. That's typical. She turned the screen toward me. There it was. Petition for appointment of guardian Stadiofia, Blackhawk County. Petitioner, Laura Cunningham Whitaker. Subject, Robert Allen Cunningham. Grounds, cognitive decline affecting financial decision-making. I read the paragraph twice. According to the document, I had forgotten to pay multiple bills, become confused, during financial discussions. Required family assistance for daily decisions. I felt something inside my chest tighten. Not anger. Something colder. You know what's interesting? Rebecca said. What? She filed this 2 days after the bank incident. So that means she expected resistance. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. Let me explain how guardianship cases usually go. Please do. The petitioner, in this case your daughter, tries to demonstrate that you're mentally incapable of managing your own finances. And how do they prove that? Doctor statements, witnesses, behavioral examples. I thought about the conversation with Dr. Benson that had apparently happened without me. She already spoke to my doctor. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Did he examine you for cognitive decline? No. Did you authorize him to discuss your medical status with her? No. She wrote something in a notebook. Interesting. Then she asked the most important question of the entire meeting. Mr. Cunningham, do you want to fight this? The way she said it made the room quiet. Because the truth is, many people don't. Many elderly parents simply surrender. Family pressure, fatigue, shame. But something about Laura telling strangers I was confused had flipped a switch in my brain. Yes, I said. Rebecca nodded once. Good. Then she smiled slightly. Because you have a strong case. She opened another file. First, she said, we established medical clarity. What does that mean? You undergo a full independent cognitive evaluation. Like a dementia test? Exactly. And if I pass, then her entire argument collapses. I like the sound of that. Second, she continued, we document financial activity. She pointed at the 3 transfers. Did you authorize these? No. Do you have written permission or signed documents approving them? No. Then we subpoena the transaction records. And if she moved funds without legal authority? Rebecca's voice stayed calm. That's not guardianship. What is it? Potential financial exploitation. The word landed heavily on the desk between us. Exploitation. It sounded uglier than theft, because it carried betrayal with it. Third, Rebecca said, we prepare for court. When is the hearing? She checked the calendar. Preliminary hearing scheduled for May 9th. That's 5 weeks. Exactly. Is that good? Yes. She closed the folder. It gives us time. I stood up to leave, but Rebecca stopped me. One more thing, Mr. Cunningham. Yes. From this moment forward, assume every conversation with your daughter could be used in court. Mean it. Stay calm. Stay polite. Never argue. That might be difficult. She smiled again. Think of it as construction work. That surprised me. How so? You're building a foundation. When I walked outside, the late afternoon sun had begun to soften. For the first time since the bank meeting, I felt something new. Not fear. Preparation. The next morning, I scheduled the cognitive evaluation. 2 hours of memory tests, problem solving, and neurological questions. Numbers, patterns, logic, puzzles. At the end, the doctor, a quiet man named Dr. Halpern, removed his glasses and looked at me carefully. Mr. Cunningham, he said. Yes. I see no signs of cognitive impairment. I smiled. That's good to hear. He nodded. In fact, he added, your executive functioning scores are above average for your age. Above average. I almost laughed. That evening, Laura called. Dad, she said brightly. How are you feeling today? I leaned back in my chair. Perfectly clear, I said. Oh, good. There was a pause. Then she asked the question she'd been building toward. Did you think any more about those bank documents? I looked at Margaret's photo on the shelf. Then I answered calmly. Yes. And I'm going to let a judge look at them. Silence filled the line. And for the first time since this whole thing began, my daughter sounded nervous. Courtrooms are quieter than people expect. Not silent, just controlled. Every sound seems deliberate. The rustle of paper, the scrape of a chair, the low murmur of lawyers discussing things that sound ordinary but can dismantle entire lives. The hearing was scheduled for May 9th, 2023.9:00 a.m. Rebecca told me to arrive 20 minutes early. I arrived 45. Old construction habit. If you show up early, the building doesn't get the chance to surprise you. The courthouse in Cedar Falls is a square limestone building from the 1950s. Solid, practical, the kind of place built by men who believed walls should last longer than the arguments inside them. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 3B and watched people come and go. Divorces, traffic disputes, a young man arguing with a parking officer. Normal life. Then Laura walked down the hallway. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Not because she had changed, because of the way she was looking at me. Not like a daughter, like an opponent. She wore a navy suit I'd never seen before. Her husband Mark walked beside her, whispering something that made her nod sharply. They both stopped when they saw me. Dad. Her voice carried that same gentle tone she used in the bank, the one meant for witnesses. Laura, you came early. So did you. She glanced toward Rebecca, who was flipping through a folder beside me. You're a lawyer? She asked. Yes. Laura forced a polite smile. You didn't need to hire someone, Dad. This hearing is just a formality. Rebecca didn't even look up from the papers. Guardianship hearings are never formality, she said calmly. Laura's smile tightened. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the courtroom doors opened. Cunningham guardianship petition. The clerk called. We walked inside. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old books. Judge Martin sat behind the bench, a tall man with silver hair and the expression of someone who had spent 30 years listening to people lie politely. Rebecca and I sat at one table. Laura and her attorney sat across from us. I noticed something immediately. Her lawyer had a thick folder, very thick. Laura had come prepared. The clerk began the proceedings. Case number 23, G417. Petition for guardianship of Robert Allen Cunningham. Judge Martin adjusted his glasses. Petitioner? Laura's attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. He spoke confidently. Mrs. Whitaker is requesting guardianship due to documented cognitive decline in her father that has begun affecting his financial decision-making. There it was again. Cognitive decline. The phrase floated through the courtroom like a diagnosis. Laura was called to the stand first. She walked up calmly, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore the oath. Then she sat. Her lawyer began gently. Mrs. Whitaker, why did you file this petition? Laura sighed softly. The performance was almost impressive. I'm worried about my father. Her voice trembled just enough. He forgets bills, he gets confused about money. And recently he refused to sign important financial documents because he didn't understand them. The lawyer nodded sympathetically. And you believe he's unable to manage his finances? Yes. How long have you noticed these changes? About a year. A year. Interesting. Margaret had died 14 months ago. Convenient timeline. Then the lawyer asked the question he'd been building toward. What would guardianship allow you to do? Laura folded her hands. It would allow me to protect my father's assets and make sure he's taken care of. Protect. Such a nice word. Rebecca stood. Your Honor, may I cross-examine? Judge Martin nodded. You may. Rebecca approached the witness, stand slowly. Her voice stayed calm. Mrs. Whitaker, you testified that your father has difficulty managing money. Yes. And that is why you requested financial guardianship? Yes. Rebecca nodded. Let's talk about money then. She held up a document. Are you familiar with these transfers? Laura leaned forward slightly. Yes. 3 transfers from your father's account in February totaling $100,000. Laura nodded again. Yes. Did your father authorize those transfers? Yes, she said immediately. Rebecca tilted her head. Do you have written authorization? Laura hesitated. Well, but he agreed verbally. Rebecca turned toward the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit B. The clerk took the document. Rebecca continued calmly. Bank login records show the transfers were initiated from Mrs. Whitaker's laptop, while her father was not present. Laura's expression changed slightly, just a flicker. But I saw it. Rebecca turned back toward her. Mrs. Whitaker, if your father is incapable of managing his finances, she paused, then asked the question that made the courtroom go very quiet. Why did you need his permission to move the money at all? Laura blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed again. And for the first time since this hearing began, my daughter didn't have an answer. When Laura couldn't answer Rebecca's question, the courtroom became very still. Not dramatically still, just the kind of silence where people stop shuffling papers and start paying attention. My daughter looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something quickly. Laura cleared her throat. Well, my father asked me to help manage things, she said. Rebecca nodded politely. I understand, but that's not what I asked. Laura shifted in her chair. Rebecca repeated the question slowly. If your father is mentally incapable of managing his finances, as your petition claims, why would you require his permission before moving money from his account? Laura's lips parted again. No words came out. The judge leaned slightly forward. Mrs. Whitaker, Judge Martin said calmly, you may answer the question. Laura glanced at the papers in front of her. I was trying to help him gradually transition control. Rebecca didn't move. Gradually? Yes. So you believed he was competent enough to approve financial transfers in February? Laura hesitated. But incompetent enough for guardianship in April? The silence deepened. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second before continuing. Laura's lawyer stood up. Objection argumentative. Judge Martin waved a hand lazily. Overruled. The witness may answer. Laura shifted again. I was concerned about his judgment, she said weakly. Rebecca returned to the table and picked up another folder. Your Honor, she said, the defense would like to introduce 2 additional exhibits. The clerk stepped forward. Rebecca continued. First, the results of an independent neurological evaluation conducted by Dr. Samuel Halpern on April 12th. She handed the report to the clerk. Judge Martin scanned the first page. His eyebrows rose slightly. Doctor concludes no cognitive impairment, he read aloud. Rebecca nodded. Correct, Your Honor. Laura's lawyer stood quickly. We object to that evaluation. The petitioner's physician has expressed concerns. Rebecca interrupted calmly. With respect, Dr. Benson never performed a cognitive exam on Mr. Cunningham. The judge looked up. Is that accurate? Laura's lawyer hesitated. Yes, technically. Rebecca folded her hands. Dr. Halpern's evaluation included memory recall tests, executive function analysis, and neurological screening. She paused. Mr. Cunningham scored above average for his age group. The judge leaned back in his chair. That was the first moment I saw real doubt appear on his face. Rebecca continued. Second exhibit, bank activity logs. The clerk passed another document to the judge. These logs show that the 3 transfers, totaling $100,000, were initiated from Mrs. Whitaker's personal laptop. Laura's attorney spoke again. That doesn't prove wrongdoing. No, Rebecca agreed calmly. It proves access. She turned slightly toward Laura. Mrs. Whitaker, when you logged into your father's account that day, where was he? Laura hesitated again. He was at home. So he was not present? No. And you had his password? Yes. Rebecca nodded slowly. No further questions. The judge removed his glasses. He studied Laura for several seconds. Then he asked the question no one expected. Mrs. Whitaker, how much money do you currently have in your personal savings account? Laura blinked. I'm not sure why that matters. It matters because you've asked this court to place your father's entire estate under your financial control. He folded his hands. So I'll ask again. How much money do you have in your account? Laura looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable. Approximately $80,000, she said quietly. Rebecca stood again. Your Honor, may I clarify? Go ahead. Rebecca opened one final document. A subpoenaed bank record shows Mrs. Whitaker's balance was $3,200 before the February transfers. She slid the paper forward, and $103,000 afterward. The courtroom air seemed to collapse inward. Laura's face turned pale. Her lawyer rubbed his forehead slowly. Judge Martin looked down at the documents for nearly a full minute. Then he placed them on the desk. Mrs. Whitaker, he said calmly. Yes, Your Honor. You told this court you were trying to protect your father. Yes. He nodded. But based on the evidence presented, he tapped the transfer records once. It appears the person needing protection may actually be your father. The judge turned toward the clerk. This court denies the petition for guardianship. Laura inhaled sharply, but he wasn't finished. Additionally, he continued, I am referring these financial transactions to the county prosecutor for review under Rio Wilder financial exploitation statutes. The words hung in the air like thunder. Laura's lawyer closed his folder slowly. Mark, her husband, stared straight ahead. I remained seated. Rebecca leaned toward me and whispered quietly, "You're free, Mr. Cunningham." Free. For a long moment I didn't move. Across the courtroom, Laura finally looked at me, not like a daughter, not even like an opponent, like someone who had just realized the story she had been telling everyone was about to be examined under a very bright light. When the hearing ended, people began leaving the courtroom quietly. Chairs moved, folders closed, voices returned to normal volume. Just another case finished in a small county courthouse. But for me, something much larger had ended, and something else had begun. Rebecca packed her documents carefully. "You handled that well," she said. I mostly sat still. "That's harder than it sounds." I nodded. Across the room, Laura stood near the door with her lawyer. Mark whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. For the first time since she was a child, my daughter looked genuinely uncertain. Not angry, uncertain. There's a difference. Anger believes it's right. Uncertainty begins to understand it might not be. Rebecca handed me a small folder. "Copies of everything," she said. Inside, with a medical evaluation, the bank logs, and the judge's written denial of the guardianship petition. The last page included a short sentence that felt heavier than the rest. "The court finds no evidence of cognitive impairment." 8 simple words. 8 words that erased months of whispers. We stepped into the hallway. The courthouse was quieter now. A janitor pushed a cart past us slowly, humming to himself. Rebecca checked her watch. "The prosecutor's office will likely review the financial transfers within a few weeks," she said. "What happens then?" "That depends on what your daughter decides to do." "Meaning?" "If she returns the money quickly, it may stay a civil matter. And if she doesn't?" Rebecca closed the folder gently. "Then it could become criminal." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't understand. Because I understood perfectly. Laura stepped into the hallway a few minutes later. Her lawyer walked ahead toward the elevator, clearly finished with the situation. Mark followed him. For a moment, Laura and I stood alone in the corridor. 74 years of life, together reduced to 10 quiet feet of distance. She spoke first. "Dad." I waited. Her voice sounded smaller now. "You didn't have to do all this." I looked at her. "Do what?" "Bring lawyers, doctors, court." I nodded slowly. "You're right." She seemed relieved for a moment. Then I finished the sentence. "You didn't have to start it." The relief disappeared. We stood there in silence. Finally, she asked the question that had probably been bothering her since the judge spoke. "Are you going to press charges?" I considered the words carefully. For 45 years, I built houses and commercial buildings. When something cracked in the foundation, you didn't ignore it. But you also didn't tear down the entire structure if it could still be repaired. "I'm not the prosecutor," I said, "but you could push it." "Yes." And I looked at her for a long moment. "You took $100,000 from me, Laura." She looked down. I was going to give back. When she didn't answer. That told me everything I needed to know. 2 weeks later, the money reappeared in my account. Every dollar, $100,000, transferred back quietly with no explanation. Rebecca called the same afternoon. "That's a good sign," she said. "For who?" "For everyone." The prosecutor reviewed the case, but ultimately declined to file charges. Lack of long-term financial damage. Restitution completed. Family dispute. Legal language again. Cold and tidy. But the truth was simpler. My daughter had tried something, and it had failed. 3 months later, I sold the house. Not because I had to. Because I wanted a clean line between the past and the future. The house sold for $565,000 in 11 days. I moved into a smaller place near the river, 2 bedrooms, a porch, and a coffee shop within walking distance. Margaret would have liked it. Quiet. Practical. One last thing remained. I met with Rebecca again and created a legal trust. Not for Laura, for my grandson Ethan. He was 16, quiet, and still possessed that rare human quality called gratitude. The trust will become accessible when he turns 30, not before. Rebecca smiled when we signed the documents. "Smart planning," she said. "I learned recently how important it is." Laura and I speak occasionally now. Short phone calls, polite ones. The relationship isn't what it used to be, but it isn't entirely gone either. Some things break cleanly, others crack and remain standing. Families are like that. A few months ago, I ran into Ethan Parker, the banker at the grocery store. He recognized me immediately. "How are you doing, Mr. Cunningham?" "Very well." He hesitated before asking the question. "So everything worked out?" I smiled. "Yes." Then I pushed my cart toward the checkout. But before I left, I turned back and added one final sentence. "You know," I said, "for while everyone kept telling me I was confused." Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable. But the funny thing is, I picked up my groceries. The only person who couldn't answer the judge's question wasn't me. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription.